In the Chesapeake Bay, off the coast of Virginia, lies a small island locked in a battle against time and tide. This is Tangier Island, a place with a centuries-old history which could be almost entirely underwater before the next century, potentially making its residents the first climate change refugees in the continental United States. First mapped by the famous explorer Captain John Smith in 1608, Tangier Island was settled by fishermen from Cornwall, England, in the 17th century. For hundreds of years, their descendants have lived in this remote spot, developing a unique way of life and even their own distinct dialect of English, a remnant of the speech of those first settlers. Life here is quiet and close-knit. The roughly 400 residents mostly get around on golf carts and bicycles, and their lives are deeply connected to the water, with the local economy almost entirely dependent on harvesting blue crabs and oysters from the bay. This unique heritage has earned the island a place on the National Register of Historic Places. But this historic community is facing an existential threat. The very water that has sustained them for generations is now threatening to swallow their home. Since 1850, Tangier Island has lost about two-thirds of its land. The problem is twofold. First, global sea levels are rising at an accelerating rate due to climate change. With an average elevation of only about 3 feet, the island is extremely vulnerable. Second, the land in the Chesapeake Bay region is naturally sinking. This process, known as glacial rebound, is a long-term effect from the last ice age. Thousands of years ago, massive glaciers pressed down on the northern part of the continent, causing the land on the edges, like the Chesapeake region, to bulge upwards. Now that the glaciers have melted, the northern lands are rising, and this bulge is slowly sinking back down. This combination of rising water and sinking land is a recipe for disaster for a low-lying island like Tangier. Scientists who study the island are clear in their predictions. They warn that without major intervention, the habitable parts of Tangier will turn into wetlands, making it impossible to live there. The island would become uninhabitable within the next 50 to 100 years. However, not everyone on the island sees it the same way. Many residents, including Mayor James Ooker Eskridge, have historically been skeptical about the role of climate change. They tend to see the problem as erosion, the relentless washing away of the shoreline by waves and storms, something they have witnessed their entire lives. From their perspective, the solution isn't necessarily to address global climate change, but to build practical defenses like seawalls and stone jetties to protect their land. The situation has also sparked a national conversation, with some labeling the residents of Tangier as potential climate change refugees. It's a term many on the island strongly reject. They see themselves as a resilient community fighting to save their ancestral home, not as victims waiting for a handout. In fact, you can even find T-shirts sold on the island that say, "I refuse to be a climate change refugee." Saving Tangier Island would be an enormous and costly challenge. A 2021 study estimated that a full protection and restoration plan would cost between $250 and $350 million. This would involve building extensive stone walls around the island's vulnerable areas and upgrading the town's infrastructure to cope with more frequent flooding. The island's homes, its school, churches, and the docks essential for the crabbing industry are all at risk. The loss of Tangier would not just be a loss of land, it would be the end of a unique American culture, preserved for centuries by its isolation. Despite the daunting challenge, there is a growing effort to save the island. In recent years, a new sense of urgency has brought officials and residents together. In May 2024, federal, state, and local leaders met with the community to create a state-certified resilience plan, a crucial step for securing the large-scale funding needed for major protection projects. Those efforts are beginning to pay off. In May 2025, U.S. Senators Mark Warner and Tim Kaine announced a significant injection of federal funds. Over $15 million were allocated for coastal resilience in Virginia, with more than 10 of that money specifically designated for Tangier Island. This money is intended for dredging the channel and then using that dredged material to build up the island and fight erosion. Senator Kaine also pointed to other funds secured in 2024 and 2025 to push forward with building seawalls and other protective structures. The U.S.
Army Corps of Engineers is already involved in projects, including the construction of a stone jetty to protect the vital harbor. The story of Tangier has also been gaining national attention. A recent documentary called Been Here, Stay Here, filmed over 6 years, highlights the island's unique culture and its fight for survival. The film aims to bring wider awareness to the plight of this small community on the front lines of a changing climate. Tangier Island is at a crossroads. It is a microcosm of a larger global issue, a place where the abstract science of climate change meets the concrete reality of people's lives, homes, and heritage. The recent infusion of funding offers a glimmer of hope, a chance to fight back against the encroaching waters. But the question remains, will it be enough to save this unique piece of American history from disappearing beneath the waves of the Chesapeake Bay? The fate of Tangier Island in the coming decades will be a powerful testament to the challenges we all face in an era of rising seas.
A tragic incident in Oklahoma has once again brought the controversial world of private big cat ownership into the national spotlight. In a story blending personal tragedy with the long shadow of the Tiger King saga, an animal handler has been killed by one of the tigers he dedicated his life to. On Saturday, September 20th, 2025, Ryan Easley, the 37-year-old operator of the Growler Pines Tiger Preserve, was fatally attacked by a tiger at his facility near Hugo in southeastern Oklahoma. According to the Choctaw County Sheriff, Easley was performing an act with the tiger when something went wrong, resulting in him being attacked. When deputies arrived at the scene, Easley was not breathing. The preserve, which he opened with his wife in 2021, described the event as a tragic accident. In a statement, the facility called the death a painful reminder of both the beauty and unpredictability of the natural world, adding that Easley understood the risks involved, not out of recklessness, but out of love for the animals. For many, this story would be a local tragedy, but Easley's connections quickly drew national attention. He was an associate of Joseph Maldonado, the man the world knows as Joe Exotic, the central figure from the Netflix series Tiger King. Animal rights group PETA stated that Easley had acquired tigers from both Joe Exotic and another figure from the series, Bhagavan Doc Antle, for his traveling business, Show Me Tigers. Joe Exotic, who is currently serving a 21-year prison sentence for a murder-for-hire plot and wildlife violations, confirmed a past relationship, stating that about 18 years ago, he allowed Easley to keep his tigers at his zoo for one winter. The connection to Tiger King immediately reignited a fierce debate. PETA quickly released a statement, referring to Growler Pines as a roadside zoo and highlighting past allegations against Easley. The animal rights group claimed that in 2017, Easley was caught on video violently whipping tigers during a training session, striking one animal 31 times. PETA's statement asserted, "It's never safe for humans to interact directly with apex predators, and it's never a surprise when a human is attacked by a stressed big cat who has been caged, whipped, and denied everything natural and important to them." The organization is calling for remaining wild animal exhibitors to send their animals to accredited sanctuaries. Friends and supporters of Easley paint a very different picture. The preserve he ran with his wife has canceled all tours and encounters. Their statement emphasized his passion, saying he dedicated his life to the protection and care of these magnificent animals. The preserve's website also notes that his traveling show underwent 32 unannounced inspections by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and passed them all. A GoFundMe page has been set up to support his wife and daughter, and friends have described him as an amazing person with an unmatched passion for his work. Joe Exotic also weighed in from prison. In since-deleted social media posts, he offered prayers to Easley's family, saying, "Ryan took great care of his animals. He loved every one of those tigers." He later pushed back against PETA's claims and complained that media outlets were using his name to generate headlines. This incident serves as a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in keeping and interacting with wild animals. While those who knew Ryan Easley remembered his deep connection and love for his tigers, critics argue that such tragedies are an inevitable consequence of an industry that puts both animals and humans at risk. The death of Ryan Easley is not just a personal tragedy for his family, but another chapter in the complex and deeply divisive debate over big cat ownership in America.
California has enacted a groundbreaking law prohibiting most law enforcement officers, including federal agents, from wearing masks that conceal their identities while on duty. This legislation sets the stage for a significant legal confrontation between the state and the federal government. On Saturday, September 20th, 2025, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed Senate Bill 627, known as the No Secret Police Act, into law. This measure responds directly to the Trump administration's intensified immigration enforcement actions within the state. The bill was specifically prompted by recent events in Los Angeles, where federal agents wearing masks and using unmarked vehicles conducted mass arrests, including the detention of bystander day laborers. These actions led to widespread community fear and protests. Proponents of the law argue that masked officers erode public trust, making it difficult for citizens to distinguish between legitimate law enforcement and criminals. Governor Newsom described the sight of these masked agents as something out of a dystopian sci-fi movie. The No Secret Police Act is comprehensive. It prohibits law enforcement from wearing face coverings like ski masks, balaclavas, or neck gaiters that obscure their identity during operations. Furthermore, it mandates that officers must be clearly identifiable by their name and badge number. This rule applies not only to local police and county sheriffs, but also to federal agents, such as those from Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, when they are operating within California. However, the law includes several important exceptions. The ban on masks does not apply to SWAT team operations or to officers involved in approved undercover assignments. It also permits the use of protective gear for safety reasons, such as N95 medical masks, respirators, motorcycle helmets, or face shields. Notably, the law does not apply to state-level law enforcement agencies like the California Highway Patrol. The law, set to take effect on January 1, 2026, establishes clear penalties for violations. An officer who unlawfully wears a mask can be charged with an infraction or a misdemeanor. More significantly, the law allows individuals to personally sue officers for civil rights violations, such as assault or false arrest, if those acts are committed while the officer is illegally masked. Such a lawsuit could result in civil damages of at least $10,000. Law enforcement agencies have until July 1, 2026 to create and publish their own written policies regarding the use of facial coverings. This new law is part of a larger suite of bills signed by Governor Newsom aimed at counteracting President Trump's immigration policies. California's Democratic leadership has openly framed these actions as a form of resistance to protect immigrant communities from what they describe as tactics designed to instill fear. Supporters, like the bill's author Senator Scott Wiener, argue that law enforcement accountability is impossible when officers look like anonymous paramilitary forces. Hector Villagra of the Mexican-American Legal Defense and Educational Fund stated the law protects residents from the fear and confusion caused by masked, unidentified individuals snatching people off our sidewalks. Proponents also believe the law will help prevent criminals from impersonating police officers. On the other side, there is strong opposition. The Department of Homeland Security has called the bill despicable. Federal officials argue that masks are a necessary tool to protect officers and their families from retaliation and from having their personal information exposed online, a practice known as doxing. Acting U.S. Attorney Bill Esaili has stated that California has no legal authority over the federal government and that federal agents will continue to take measures to protect their identities. Local law enforcement unions in California have also voiced their opposition. The Peace Officers Research Association of California, for instance, argues that the law will unfairly impact local police officers, who they say will become collateral damage in a political struggle between the state and the federal government. They believe federal agents may simply ignore the state law, while local officers will be forced to comply, potentially endangering them and hurting recruitment efforts due to the increased personal liability. The passage of this law sets up an almost certain legal confrontation. The federal government is expected to challenge the law in court immediately. The central legal question will revolve around the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution, which generally holds that federal laws take precedence over state laws.
The courts will have to decide whether a state has the authority to regulate the on-duty conduct and equipment of federal officers operating within its borders. Beyond the legal fight, there are practical questions about how California will enforce this ban, particularly on federal agents if they are ordered by their superiors to disregard it. Some legal experts suggest that, much like previous California laws aimed at limiting federal immigration enforcement, the practical impact of this ban might be limited. However, they also acknowledge its powerful symbolic importance, offering what they call hope and optimism to communities that feel under fire. This mask ban was not an isolated action. It was signed alongside other new laws designed to protect immigrants. These include measures that require officers to identify themselves, prohibit immigration agents from entering schools and non-public areas of hospitals without a warrant, and require schools to notify their communities if immigration enforcement is on campus. Together, these laws represent a coordinated effort by California to create a firewall against federal immigration policies. As this No Secret Police Act moves toward its effective date, the nation will be watching to see how the conflict between a state's push for transparency and the federal government's security concerns plays out.